Okay, so let's continue our discussion by looking at Chapter 11 of Just Your Life by Chang Rei Lee. So in this chapter we have Hada continuing his, he's now sort of bonding with his grandson who, prior to this he's never even met before. So Thomas, Sonny's son, is he now sort of looks after him and spends time with him. So he's sort of warming up to this idea of becoming, a grandfather and rekindling some kind of relationship with his daughter and her son. We also have an important flashback to his time at the war. And it's interesting the way that the flashback relates to a scene. He's in a parking lot outside the mall, and there is a Middle Eastern teenage girl and maybe her brother, and they're putting away pieces of material into a box, pieces of black cloth. So that image of the black flag will be what triggers his memories of his time at the war. And we're also sort of introduced to the character of Kout, or Kay, and she'll play a large role in the sort of traumatic events that continue to haunt Doc Hada long past the end of the war. So it's the sort of trigger of the black piece of material, though, and this teenage girl sort of hanging it over her head, and he says she's trying to in some way make herself disappear. So we have maybe little glimpses or foreshadowing of the events that will play out in his sort of in the inset narrative, where he is talking about his time during the war. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this flashback where he is interacting with Captain Ono, and he is put in charge of the special care of one of the comfort women, Kout. So during the flashback scene, we have Captain Ono instructing Hada to take sort of special care with one of the comfort women, the girl that they call Kout. And he's determined that this one girl is depressed and suicidal and possibly a danger, so she's sort of a threat. And he decides that she needs to be isolated. And it's sort of mysterious about why he's taking all these precautions or separating this one girl from the rest. And Hada isn't completely clear on why the captain is doing this, but he can't really question the commands of his senior officer, so he just has to do what he's told. So it's set up this routine that Captain Ono will fly a black flag outside of his quarters, and then that is a message directly to Hada to bring this girl, to examine her and get her ready for a sort of special meeting with Captain Ono. So he's sort of supposed to prepare her for that day. And the black flag becomes, a symbol, and the symbol is sort of explained more thoroughly on the bottom of page 224. So the black flag is actually kind of an insult to Hada, given that it is sort of something related to his last name, Kurohata, and it indicates a kind of plague or symbol of death that his name is associated with. And he feels sort of belittled and insulted by Captain Ono, and starts to sort of resent this man who has more power than him, and sort of who takes time to sort of insult Hada and criticize him at any moment. So the black flag is explained at the bottom of 224. So I'll just read that part. What he had determined as the sign, the black flag, was of course meant for me. Hata is literally flag, and a black flag, or kuro hata, is the banner a village would raise by its gate in older times to warn of a contagion within. It is the signal of spreading death. My adoptive family, I learned right away, had an ancient lineage of apothecaries who had ventured into stricken villages and had, for unknown reasons, determined to keep the name, however inauspicious it was. Captain Ono's choice, of course, was intentionally belittling, though I could see, too, how the sign would serve to keep others away from the infirmary who would naturally assume there had been an outbreak. So it is a kind of connotation that associates Hata with death, disease, illness, contagion, right? So sort of the spread of disease. So he sees the Captain Ono as belittling him, and he's not, as the senior officer. Captain Ono has more power and can sort of control Hata. So there is this sort of military hierarchy or masculine hierarchy as well in how these two men interact with one another. So as the medical officer in charge of the sort of health and well-being of the comfort women, Hata sees sort of firsthand the painful results of the treatment of these girls. So he's the one who has to sort of send them back to duty after they've been tortured, beaten, and repeatedly sort of raped by the soldiers, and visited by 20, even 30, it said, would visit them, each one of them, and their bodies are swollen, bleeding, bruised. It's just very almost unimaginable, the pain and treatment of these girls by the soldiers. And Hata's the one who sort of he looks them over, but as long as they are still not life-threatening injuries, he is responsible for sending them back to the comfort houses to resume their duties. And his way of sort of justifying or making sense of what is the inhumane treatment of women in this context, he sort of just sees it as part of the schema or social order that is natural or normal in this military context. And at the bottom of page 227, he acknowledges that the girls are just part of this military system, the hierarchy that exists. They're at the bottom of the hierarchy, though, and their duties are just to be bodies, right? Just expendable, sexualized bodies, and treated any way that the soldiers who are higher up on this hierarchy feel entitled to treat them. They can do so. So these girls are not even considered human in some regard. They're treated more like animals or slaves. And the quote, so this is Hata's sort of reflection on the arrangement. And he says, in this schema, the commander had his level, the officer theirs, the enlisted men and others yet another, and so on and so forth until it came to the girls who had their own. All this was inviolable like any set of natural laws. So that's the breakdown of sort of the hierarchy of the military system, with the girls at the very sort of bottom rungs of that social order. And he sees firsthand how they're treated and the physical repercussions. But that's not even saying that the traumatized, mentality of these young girls who have to endure sort of sexual slavery, night after night. And Kay is sort of set aside from this, and it turns out that she has not yet done any of what she came there to do or what she was forced to do. The doctor, or Captain Ono, has yet to sort of involve her in the comfort houses. He's kept her apart. So there's some sort of mystery of why Kay is sort of singled out as somebody who is separate from the other girls or gets special treatment. So Captain Ono brings the one girl, Kout, to the infirmary where Hada is, and he's complaining that she's been sent to the commander, but she has her period, so she's menstruating and she's not fit to do her duties for the commander. So he tells Hada, you should have been more in control of the situation and sent another girl, blah, blah, blah. So he's again criticizing Hada for not doing his job. And then Hada is left alone with the girl Kout, and he speaks to her in her own language. So he speaks Korean when addressing Kout, and this makes an impression on her. So she recognizes that, perhaps, she recognizes, she says, "You are Korean." So she can tell that he's not Japanese after all, but Korean. And even though Hada says he's not, he does say that, he was born, he's lived all his life in Japan, but his family is from Korea, or they're Korean, ethnically Korean, and he has learned the language of his birth family. And she is immediately sort of reminded of her brother, who sounds just like Hada. And the fact that they share a language is important in the sense that, these are two individuals who come from the same ethnic background, even though Hada sort of pretends or tries to separate himself from that part of his ethnic identity. He, sees himself as a Japanese man, even though he is, ethnically Korean. And they sort of have a conversation. He's supposed to be sort of examining her, but it becomes apparent that he is sort of starting to have feelings, or at least he's sort of attracted to her. And she informs him that Captain Ono has been sort of taking special treatment of her, and she's afraid of what he's going to do. So she says on page 236, last night I was to visit the commander, and so he had to send me, but before that the captain had always ordered Matsu-san to keep me in our tent. Sometimes he has her bring me to his private quarters where he examines me. He runs his hands over my body and examines me everywhere, but that is all. He has kept me from the comfort house. So she hasn't even been in the comfort house, and Captain Ono has been sort of keeping her separate from the other girls, and she's afraid of Captain Ono. So he scares her, and she doesn't know what plan he has for her. And it's apparent that, the camp in which they are at, things are kind of falling apart. The commander is sort of more and more, they suspect he's been sort of drugged up, or he's not in control anymore, and more Captain Ono is the one who's kind of running things. So he's sort of taking power over from the camp as it's in disarray at the end of the war. And Kout comments on the fact that Endo, you'll remember Endo, who slashed the young girl's throat, she regards him as doing something heroic and a mercy killing. So on page 238 she says, "I am only thankful for what he did. I'm happy for my sister now. I don't cry for her anymore, and I'm hoping that someone like you will do the same for me if it comes to that." So she would rather die than be put in the situation the comfort woman work in the comfort houses.